So let's talk about containerization. Who has heard of or involved with, worked with any sort of containers? Docker is a huge name in the container world. Um, it's not the only one, but it's kind of a very popular one. Container technologies, containers, container. Essentially, it is a lightweight, and that's the key thing, a lightweight package that contains all of the information that an application needs to run. Okay, so what information does an application need to run? It needs the operating system. It needs whatever software the software developers have created, and it needs any configuration associated with that software, right? So imagine if I could take all of that and I can put it in a package, in a container, okay? Now, anytime I want to run that, I think back to the virtualization concept, right? If I've virtualized the OS or virtualized the hardware, anytime I want to spin up new instances of that, I just say, give me a copy of this package, if you will, and it just spins it up. Boom, 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 boom. And I can do it as many times as I want. Every one is exactly the same way. I don't have to reinstall software on it. I don't have to configure software on it. I don't have to do anything. But now think about this in the application world. I take an application, I put on operating system, I put the application and I put a configuration, I package it up and I call it a container. And now anytime I need more containers or more applications running, I just spin up a container. Now, why would I do that? First of all, it's faster to spin up. So remember I said lightweight. So in order to spin up the application, let's say I had a new virtual machine, right? We talked about the virtual server before. If I had a new virtual server and I tried to spin up an application, I would have to first spin up the server. And that's not quick. I mean, sometimes it could take a few minutes. Well, it's not relative to containers. It's slow. But it would take a few minutes to maybe spin up the server. Then you have to copy your application, your configuration, all of that on it, right? So it would take a while for that thing to spin up. On the other hand, if my hardware, if my virtual infrastructure is all set up, and instead of 2 or 3 or 5, 10 minutes to spin up and set up the software, if I could just spin up this Docker container, a new one, I've done exactly the same thing that I did before. You remember we talked about Amazon and how they needed more capacity during Christmas time. Well, here's another way to give yourself more capacity is by, rather than increasing or scaling out on the infrastructure side of things, is just scale out on the application side of things. But this means your application, that your hardware needs to be able to support the number of containers you're going to be able to have, that you're going to want to have. But it allows me to quickly spin these up and again, create more capacity in a very quick way. Okay. And all the cloud providers, including AWS, as well as Azure, as well as Google Cloud, have some sort of containerization, again, to support increased capacity, but also to support microservices, which we'll be talking about in a second. So does this concept of the container make sense to you? Think about it as a packaged operating system, application, and configuration all in one, and it's a lightweight operating system. It may not be the entire operating system that would exist on a server. All right, so let's go back to that picture we had before, right? So on the traditional architecture on the left-hand side of the screen, I would have my hardware, the operating system, and application, right? So if I had 3 apps, then I would have 3 of those replicated. So it's right now it only shows 1, but there would be 3 of those. Now, when I go to the virtual architecture, I'm able to have 1 piece of hardware, 3 different OSs, and now the 3 applications, or 3 OSs and 3 applications running independent of one another, right? So what have I done? I've decreased the amount of hardware from 3 times as much down to 1. Now, when I go to the container side of things, essentially what I've done is, rather than virtualizing the OS, I virtualized the application, right? So I still have one OS. Instead of three OSs, I still have one OS base operating system. But now I've got these containers. And each container contains its own OS as well, but like I said, a light version of it. But now I've containerized it, and I've been able to virtualize it in a slightly different way. So there's a similarity between 1 and 2. The only difference is that I'm running between 2 and 3. The difference is I'm running one operating system on number 3 and 3 different operating systems on number 2. So number 2 you can think of as more effective as if I was a cloud provider. That would be good because I want, somebody wants this operating system and somebody wants that operating system, and this time I'm going to virtualize it. But if I'm a company and I'm just developing an application, the operating system is the same, the base operating system. I just run it on that operating system, and I can create these app containers. It's a slightly different way of achieving the same kind of virtualization and capacity building.